Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Antikythera Mechanism, ancient computer of the Greeks. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 1900, sponge divers off the island of Antikythera in Greece found the wreck of an ancient Roman cargo ship. Among the artifacts brought up from the seafloor was a corroded lump of bronze and wood that was set aside as archaeologically minor. 2 years later, an archaeologist noticed that the corroded lump contained precisely machined gear wheels, and the most complex mechanical device discovered from the ancient world began to reveal itself. The Antikythera Mechanism is a hand-powered bronze computing device from approximately 100–150 BC that tracks the movements of the sun and moon, predicts solar and lunar eclipses, models the Metonic cycle, the Saros cycle, and the Callippic cycle, and may have displayed the positions of the 5 known planets. It contains at least 30 interlocking bronze gears of extraordinary precision. Nothing of comparable mechanical complexity would appear again in human history for over 1,000 years. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the global puzzle of unexplained ancient construction, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Archaeology is, by its nature, an incomplete science. We find only what survives, and what survives is determined not by importance, but by durability. Stone lasts, wood rots, metal corrodes, ceramics endure. The written word survives only if it is inscribed on stone or baked clay. Papyrus and vellum are hostages to humidity and fire. This means that every picture of the past, assembled from archaeological evidence, is a distortion, biased toward the materials that happen to last, rather than the activities that define the culture. With that cave in place, the structures that do survive from the ancient world are sometimes inexplicable by any conventional model of the societies that built them. We find stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons, fitted together with tolerances measured in millimeters, transported from quarries dozens of kilometers away, and raised to heights that challenge modern cranes. We find astronomical alignments so precise that they track the movements of specific stars over periods of thousands of years. We find architectural proportions that embed mathematical ratios, pi, phi, the Pythagorean theorem, in civilizations that supposedly had no formal mathematics. The challenge these structures pose is not engineering alone. It is conceptual. How did people without our tools conceive of projects on this scale? How did they solve the organizational problems of feeding and coordinating tens of thousands of workers over decades? How did they transmit technical knowledge across generations without standardized notation? The buildings stand as proof that they did it. The question of how remains genuinely open. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Antikythera Mechanism, ancient computer of the Greeks, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Antikythera Mechanism dates to approximately 100–150 BC based on radiocarbon dating and stylistic analysis of inscriptions. It was likely made in Rhodes or possibly Corinth. The inscription on the device is in the Corinthian dialect of Greek. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the mechanism contains at least 30 bronze gears, some as thin as 2 mm, with precisely cut teeth at consistent angular intervals. X-ray tomography of the device, conducted by the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, has revealed the internal gear train in detail, showing meshing tolerances consistent with fine craft production. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The device modeled the Metonic cycle of 235 synodic months, approximately 19 solar years, after which the moon returns to the same position relative to the sun on the same calendar date, a critical cycle for aligning lunar and solar calendars. It also modeled the Saros cycle of 223 synodic months used for eclipse prediction. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, front dials showed the position of the sun and moon in the zodiac and a calendar. The back dials showed eclipse prediction and Metonic/Saros cycle information. A pointer mechanism tracked the anomalistic motion of the moon, its variation in orbital speed, using an epicyclic gear that created the appearance of non-uniform motion. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of ancient sources, including Cicero, describe a device made by Archimedes that modeled the motion of the sun, moon, and planets using a similar operating principle. The Antikythera Mechanism may be the device Cicero described or one in the same tradition. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the precision of the gear cutting was achieved entirely by hand. Bronze gear cutting jigs and templates would have been required, but no such tools have survived. The tradesperson who made the Antikythera Mechanism had to cut teeth at consistent angular intervals of approximately 1.8 to 4 degrees, a technical challenge even with modern hand tools. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. Equally puzzling to investigators, nothing of comparable mechanical complexity is documented in any surviving ancient source. The device's existence is not mentioned in any ancient technical text, suggesting either that such devices were considered common enough to not require description, or that they were specialized enough to be known only to experts whose works have not survived. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation, and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Antikythera Mechanism, ancient computer of the Greeks. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the Antikythera Mechanism represents the pinnacle of a tradition of Greek mechanical engineering that was far more sophisticated than surviving texts suggest. The mechanism is unusual in its survival, not in its existence. Bronze devices do not typically survive 2,000 years in salt water. Many similar devices may have been made and lost without trace. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the mechanism was produced by a school of mechanical philosophers in Rhodes, possibly associated with the astronomer Hipparchus, who developed key mathematical tools for astronomical prediction as a demonstration mode of astronomical theory. Its function was both computational and educational. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that devices like the Antikythera Mechanism represent a technological trajectory in Hellenistic civilization that was interrupted by Roman conquest and the subsequent decline of practical Greek science. If the trajectory had continued, mechanical computing might have developed in antiquity rather than in the 18th century. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Antikythera Mechanism, ancient computer of the Greeks, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes X-ray tomography of the surviving fragments has revealed the complete gear train and inscriptions, providing direct physical evidence of the mechanism's mathematical basis and confirming that it modeled real astronomical cycles to measurable accuracy. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. The Metonic and Saros cycles modeled by the mechanism are accurate mathematical representations of actual astronomical periods, confirming the device was designed by people with sophisticated mathematical astronomy. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed Cicero's description in his Tusculan Disputations of a device made by Archimedes that on each revolution reproduces the same motions of the sun, the moon, and 5 planets provides independent textual evidence that Greek mechanical computing devices existed. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Antikythera Mechanism, ancient computer of the Greeks. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, an international collaboration, has produced the most complete analysis of the device's function to date, including a 2021 paper proposing a detailed reconstruction of the full mechanism, including the planetary display. Full-scale physical replicas have been constructed using modern and ancient techniques. The mechanism has fundamentally altered our understanding of ancient Greek technological capability and demonstrated that the history of computing machinery begins not in the 17th century, but at least in the 2nd century BC. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Antikythera Mechanism, ancient computer of the Greeks, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Antikythera Mechanism ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions, it is a process, and the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.